Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family. Hello and welcome to the highlights programme of The Real Me, a set of interviews I decided to do to show you the person behind the politician, the person behind all the sound bites and the spin. We've done some incredible interviews. I've enjoyed every single one. There have been tears, there have been revelations, and there's been laughter too. First up, it's the Shadow Trade Secretary, Emily Thornberry.
And then when I was about to turn 16, I had a massive row with my mum. I'd had many rows with my mum before then, but this was the massive row. And so she chucked me out. So I went to live with my dad in London, and he was living at that point in Hammersmith. So I lived with him. And then when I was 17, I went to school up in Shepherd's Bush. And when I was 17, Dad went to New York for the weekend. And he didn't come back because he'd got a job with the United Nations. And so because he had his expertise in Namibia, Southwest Africa, and Namibia was about to go independent, and Dad had really good connections with SWAPO, which was the organisation that in the end took over Namibia, and so on. So that's why he was there.
When you speak about your dad, you speak about his achievements, and you go and you move off the relationship that you had with him to speak about his achievements. Was he a good dad?
He was a terrible father. He was the most terrible father, but he was a great man. So it was this mixture, So he was Irish. He was very charming. He was a kind of like, he was an Irish rover. I mean, he was like, he'd light up a room. He was, as I say, very charismatic. He was very internationalist to his bones. He was, very much of the left. He was a great lover of people, particularly a lover of women. He married many, many times and had loads of girlfriends. But he was a terrible father, because of father, you need to have consistency, affection, you need to have some stability. He didn't have any of that. I mean, he was like the original kind of helicopter parent, like almost arriving in a helicopter, for a few hours and then disappearing again. We'd go and see him and he'd pick you up from the airport and he'd drive you in. We all used to laugh about this. When he picked you up from the airport and drove you into wherever he was living, he would then go, well, what are you doing with yourself? Sort yourself out, and kind of give you a lecture on, how you were ruining your life. And you'd arrive at his house and then he wouldn't speak to you again. So it was very odd, it was very odd. But I think he was probably better with me than he was with anybody else because I was the oldest. So I was the oldest out of 6. So my dad married, as I say, lots of times.
How did that affect you? How old were you when he first married again, or when you were aware that he had a girlfriend?
Well, the first I was aware was when I was 7, because the splitting up of the marriage was pretty kind of like, yeah, it was a bit of a thing. And he had a child, and the child looked just like him, and the child lived in the town. And
my goodness!
All of that. So
and you're aware of this at the age of 7.
Yeah. So you know about that. So I didn't get on particularly well with my first stepmother, although actually she was a really remarkable woman, and there are times when I realise I've learned so much from her. In fact, I met a variety of different women through my father and through my father's various marriages that I would never have anything to do with. You know, I learned about, and their different perspectives on life and so on. But, you know, I also felt kind of quite sad for my dad, who was just like a great romantic. And every time, you know, he'd fall in love again, and this was the time, and this was going to be happiness, and this time it would work. And it never did, you know? And then, you know, and he never managed to keep any long-term bonds with anybody, really. I mean, he did with me, because I was his oldest child. But, you know, Peter, his son who lived in Norway, wouldn't speak to him. My brothers wouldn't speak to him. You know, I've got 2 half-sisters in France who just like...
Is your dad still with us?
No. So that was the other sad thing, really, was that he... So he'd been in Bosnia. He'd been peacekeeping in Bosnia. And he was like on this little island off the coast of Croatia, miles and miles and miles away from anywhere. And at the tender mercies of this particular woman, and started to get dementia.
When was this? So
it was really, you know, for somebody who'd like burnt all your bridges, do you know what I mean? After the pursuit of love, you know, this is the one, and she definitely wasn't the one. And I remember saying to him, I'm really worried about your dad. You know, I think we need to make some long-term plans. And she looked me in the eyes and said, I will always look after him. Well, a year later, he arrives in Heathrow in a wheelchair saying, I have dementia, Emily, look after me. You know, and his bank account has largely been emptied and all of this. You know, so this is what happens. And nobody wanted to have anything to do with him. But he was my dad. And my brother Jim, who's a really good soul, actually, I mean, I had a general election coming up. I had, you know, all sorts of stuff going on with my family, you know, A-levels and O-levels, GCSEs, and Lord knows what going on with my family. So I was really, really busy. So Jim found an old people's home for him to move into. And then I did the visiting. So I would go and see him. And actually, over the next few years, he had this thing called Lewy bodies dementia, which is a type of Parkinson's. Normally people get Parkinson's and then they get Lewy bodies. And Lewy bodies is horrible. All dementia is horrible, but this is a really horrible form of dementia. You get these visions, and he would get visions about children, which is ironic, and children in need and children desperate. And he would get really upset. And he would say, the children, which is quite hard. And there was nothing could be done about it. You couldn't give any of the anti-dementia drugs that you can give to people who have other types of dementia. So he had to live with all of this. And it came in waves. And he would say to me, it's a bit like being in the sea, Emily. Sometimes I'm swimming, and then sometimes I'm drowning. And I'd make sure that I saw him in the morning because he was more compos mentis in the morning, and by the afternoon he was sort of losing it. And I started off really, really resenting this. You know, because he'd left me when I was 7. He'd left me when I was 17. There were children all over the world, quite frankly, whose belief in themselves was not what it should be, quite often, because of the behaviour of their dad. And he had been completely irresponsible and totally selfish, but I still loved him, and he was there by himself. And I forgave him. And for me, it came like a blessing, you know, because there's an awful lot of energy used up in anger, yeah? Or, I mean, like, that's who he was. And actually, I learned so much from having a dad like that. A lot of negative stuff, but actually, I am who I am, you know, and I'm a mixture of my mum, and I'm a mixture of my dad, and I'm a mixture of my experiences from my childhood, and it's all right. And when he died, I was I was there during the day before he died. And as I said, he was Irish, and he was lying on his bed, and I was stroking his hair, and I was singing these Irish songs to him. And then he went to sleep, and then I went home, and then I got a call saying that he'd died. But he died in the way that he would ever want to die. He was in bed. He was a great favourite in the home. He used to think that he was back in the United Nations because everybody working in the home came from all over the world, right? So he used to think that this was the Philippines representative. It was very funny. Anyway, and he was in this bed, and there were 7 women, I was told, sitting around his bed from all over the world, weeping as he died. That was the way he'd want to go.
Emily Thornberry there on her personal journey. Next up, it's one of my favourites. It is Johnny Mercer, the Conservative MP for Plymouth Moorview, the former Veterans Minister. He spoke to me about serving our country in Afghanistan, about his relationship with the Prime Minister, and on what it's like to be sacked as a government minister.
The last 6 months has been a big education for me, for sure.
Why? What's happened in the last 6 months?
Well, I mean, I was sacked from the government, which is fine. You know, everyone's got to get sacked every now and then. But then the kind of machine turns against you, right? And you realise, I guess, when people go around saying different things to different people, obviously you are eventually going to work that out. And that's obviously quite a painful process. And it's been a crash course in politics. And what I've learned is that whilst it did make me very cross at the time, and the Afghanistan situation as a failure of politics, and what's happened to Dennis Hutchins over the last few weeks, the soldier on trial in Northern Ireland, it does kind of make me very cross. There is kind of no point howling at the weather, right? And I've got to find a way of doing things differently and in a better way to try and achieve the outcomes I'm trying to achieve. So it's been, I've learned a lot. I've learned, and I've made mistakes. I think I've been very critical of all my colleagues, which I think, in hindsight, I wouldn't do that again. There were good people in there. There were good people in there. But there's no doubt about it that, there are serious problems in the quality of our politics at the moment. And I think that, the public will only really put up with it for so long.
What's the biggest problem?
I mean, it's a broad field. I think, one of the things I found very difficult is this idea of teamwork, how teamwork... So I'm not really seen as a team player in politics, right? Which is absolutely bizarre if you look at my background, right? So the idea of being a team player, or teamwork, if you like, is totally different in political parties as it is to, for example, in my background, where you couldn't survive if you weren't a decent team player. And I think that creates sometimes a bit of a dangerous environment, because people end up doing things they then regret, and voting for things they felt like they shouldn't vote for, saying things they felt like they shouldn't say, because you're kind of in that atmosphere and everyone's saying, well, if you don't do this, you're not part of the team. And I know individuals in there think, actually, this probably isn't the right thing to do, but they then sort of go and do it anyway, and because they want to be part of a team. And it's not a bad thing to want to be part of a team, but outside politics, that is completely the wrong thing to do. So, I think there's a lot of changes that I'd like to see in politics, but, in the big scheme of things, I've been here 5 minutes, and, let's see what happens.
So the words that you said about Boris Johnson, who you were a big supporter of in the leadership contest, you said Boris Johnson surrounds himself with cowards and desperately weak advisors.
It's difficult when you're in this for a cause like I am, okay? So I'm not here because I like being a politician. I'm not here because I like the stage and I really want to progress in politics. I'm here for a cause, right? And when you're fighting for that cause and you receive such a setback, and people are a little bit disingenuous about it, you are going to react quite badly. Now, would I say those things again? No. But unfortunately, they are true, okay? The stuff around what we've just done to Northern Ireland veteran Dennis Hutchins, where he's essentially died in a court process, that has happened because of political cowardice, because we have not seen through our promises to our veterans. And, so those are the facts of the matter. People can, be uncomfortable with that, but that's the reality of it. If we committed to that, like we committed to Brexit, for example, or the European Football League, or the Green Agenda, okay, these veterans would see out their days in peace, and we'd actually, be on our way to being the best country in the world to be a veteran. But as it stands, we're a long way from that. And obviously that made me pretty cross at the time. And I feel like whatever I've done here, I do play everybody with a straight bat. Whether it's comfortable or not, I will play everybody with a straight bat. And I'll say the same thing to different individuals. And all I wanted to be treated was the same in return, right? And with a bit of respect. Some individuals thought they could get away with not doing that. And I called it out, and people don't like it when you call it out, but, unlucky.
Your cause is to support those people who serve our country and who have served our country. After you were fired, obviously you felt very angry and hurt by that episode. Do you speak to Boris Johnson still?
No, I have no relationship with Boris. I mean, I wrote to him about the Northern Ireland thing because I felt like when the government produced its solution to Northern Ireland, which I think is a bit crass, a bit ham-fisted, and it's going to upset a lot of people, there's better ways of doing it. I thought I kind of owed it to the Prime Minister to write what he should be doing and, who he should speak to, the police and people families groups who've worked in this for a long time. There is a path through without just drawing a line and cutting off pathways to access for people whose kids were murdered by the IRA. That is a big step to take, but that is what the government proposals are. And I thought I owed it to him to write to him what they are. So I wrote him a letter, but, he doesn't even bother to respond. So, I have no relationship with the Prime Minister, which is sad. And, and I feel, I'm going through that phase where I advocated for him very strongly because I thought the things that I cared about were going to happen and that he was my best chance of that stuff happening. And, obviously now I feel like a bit of an idiot, but I've just got to wear that out. That is politics.
Someone like Ricky Gervais in this country, he says whatever he wants and he doesn't care about because he can't be cancelled.
I still think that even he toes the line a little bit. I usually he thinks about it. I mean, I do think he considers it. You have to, because the weird thing is, like for me, like what I feel about what's happening right now. I mean, I feel like I could talk about it on stage because I'm established, but I also think like, if you're partners with the biggest streaming service in the world. And then if you also, you're doing a commercial for this international company. And so you have to think, how much do I really want to rock the boat? So I do think that sometimes I think people forget that this is supposed to be an irritant. You are supposed to, as a comedian, you're supposed to be controversial. You're supposed to take the other side. You're supposed to get the audience to question their foundational thinking.
That ability to look away and let things be is a sign of maturity. And behind closed doors, and this is what the racism of low expectations is about, is with those Muslims, they're just not there yet. That's really what it boils down to.
That's a really interesting point as far as is it this expectation that Muslims are likely to react violently if they're upset? That's a very patronising
because the Christians used to do that in the past. They're over it now.
Right.
They're old enough, they're mature enough, they're adults. The assumption is if you're a Muslim, a drawing of the Prophet Muhammad, whether it's flattering or not, is going to offend you. Can you look away?
Well, it's not necessarily true that all Muslims would be offended.
Well, first of all, it's not true.
Yeah.
That's again why I think it's a form of racism, and it's a form of, in itself, if you want to pursue the notion of Islamophobia, it is actually a form of phobia.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation, This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Next up is one of the most powerful interviews I've ever done in my entire career. It's with the Labour MP, Vicky Foxcroft. She is the Member of Parliament for Lewisham, Deptford. She talks to me about being a survivor of sexual abuse and so much more.
It was a fairly tough background. I spent a large amount of our childhood moving about quite a lot. It made it quite hard at times to be able to get a decent education when you're changing school a lot. But also there was quite a lot of other things that went on in our life that were also, you know, quite big distractions.
Obviously, you say whatever you want to say, but do you want to talk about any of those distractions?
So my mum suffered a lot of domestic abuse when we were younger, and that's part of the reasons why we had to move about, you know, so much. And I kind of, as you get older, you think and you reflect on these things, and sometimes when you're younger, you're quite angry because you think, oh, well, why is this happening in my life? You know, why on my 8-year-old birthday am I getting a pair of school shoes and I'm not getting a tub of hair gel, which I really want? But when you get older, you realise actually your mum couldn't afford that, and actually she was prioritising the things that were important for you. But when you're younger, you can be sometimes a bit of a brat, to be fair.
Is your mum okay with you talking about her the domestic abuse that she's...
Yeah, I spoke to my mum beforehand, and in fact, it was a few years ago when I spoke to her and I said, I'm so sorry, Mum. I was quite hard work as a kid and not really kind of realising everything that she was going through at the time and how hard everything was for her. So yeah, she's okay.
Okay. That must have been a tough time, obviously, for your mum, but it affects children as well who are witnessing their mums being subject to abuse, violence, whatever it was. Do you still have scars from that?
Yeah, very much so. And it's, you know, sometimes domestic abuse is unfortunately also with, sexual abuse. And, you know, sometimes so me and my sister were subject to that when we were younger. And you're too scared to say anything about anything that's happening to you in life because your mum's also being beaten up and you don't know what will happen if you go and raise, you know, kind of things that have gone and happened in your life. And so, you know, I know me and my sister are really, you know, super, super close, and, you know, we chat all the time. And, you know, I was chatting to her about, you know, this interview today before we came on. And I think it's really, you know, it is important to be able to talk about stuff, but it is also really difficult too. So I know that I don't talk about things that happened in my life very much because it can be quite tough to be able to do that.
I am a little lost for words because it's very difficult to hear somebody say that they were subject to, not only witness to domestic abuse that their mum was going through, but also that they were personally subject to sexual abuse too. That is a lot to deal with as a child. Do you think it's important to talk about it because it will give comfort to other people? Because it's a big thing to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And also kind of in terms of politics, one of the things, you know, becoming an MP and realising and thinking, oh, you know, actually, you know, could I be an MP? Should I be an MP? But actually, life experience is really important. And actually, there will be a lot of young people out there who should think that they should be an MP, because actually what they've got to offer, you know, is really important. And it's not always having to talk about the experiences, but it is about seeking to change, you know, the laws, seeking to make sure that, you know, domestic abuse refuges are properly funded, you know, seeking support that when kids have gone and had, you know, that real trauma in their life, that they're actually supported, you know, in the future. And that's what politicians can do. And if I just give you one example of, I was speaking at a school, and I love that. It's one of my favourite things in terms of the job. And I talked about, you know, moving about all of the time and being in temporary accommodation. And this kid came to me afterwards and she said, I am just like you. She's like, I'm going to go and be an MP in the future. And that is, you know, so powerful that by talking about stuff, you can make kids that might be in the classroom feeling like they're the ones that aren't going to go on and do stuff in the future. And then they've got somebody who's exactly like them and is an MP, and then being able to believe in themselves in the future and know that they can make a difference.
I don't want to go into any detail that makes you feel uncomfortable. So just say whatever you feel able to say. I don't know this. I'm guessing there was a particular man who abused you when you were I don't know how old you were when this happened. Did anything happen to that man?
Yeah. So, well, yes and no. So he's dead now, and he had quite a brutal, you know, death. And I have to say, we got interviewed by the police because of this, because we're obviously an interested party. I felt really bad because I was so happy he died. And I don't often feel like that in my life, but I was like, he's had a pretty brutal death, and, you know, and it makes me feel guilty that I feel happy about that. But when we were younger and everything was reported to the police, we got taken to a safe house.
Your mum?
Yeah, and my sister. Me and my sister were separated from each other, and it was awful, but they had to separate us. But, you know, for my sister, she really didn't understand it. She thought that I was, you know, kind of abandoning her, but she'd not seen me outside the room, shouting and screaming, trying to get in the room. But we gave all of this information and nothing went and happened.
How old were you?
12, 13.
12, and your sister was?
11.
Wow.
Yeah. And so nothing went and happened in terms of that stuff. So that stays with you because you're like, we told the police about this, you know, eventually, after quite a long time, this stuff's there and they know it, and then they don't do anything with it.
So you were sexually abused by a man. You told the police you were when you were a child, obviously. You reported it to the police. You had to leave your home and go, and your mum, your sister and you had to move into a safe house.
No, so we were in a safe house while the police were interviewing us.
What's a safe house?
So you kind of, I mean, I was very young at the time, but you kind of go into like a police house and they separate you all off and they do different interviews with you at different times to make sure that nobody's encouraging somebody to say something. And, you know, obviously my mum had suffered domestic abuse from him. So it's whether or not you can be seen that the kids are, you know, saying something that isn't true. And, you know, so we we'd said everything, but then nothing happened with it because, you know, you're saying this stuff's been going on for years and, you know...
Nothing happened?
Nothing happened, no. And then afterwards, we didn't have anywhere to live. So we then had to move about.
Because it was his house?
Yeah. Which I think is one of the reasons why my mum stayed with him until that point, was to keep a roof over our heads. And, you know, you can understand that. You know, she's thinking, oh, I'm just being beaten. Like, I mean, he did hit me once or twice, but, you know, you're thinking, oh, at least they've got a roof over their heads. And then afterwards we were, there's actually some really kind people, but they let us stay in their caravan outside their house in Rawtenstall.
Where's Rawtenstall?
In Lancashire, Rosendale.
Yeah.
Yeah, so up north.
So you lived in a caravan for a bit?
Yeah, yeah.
How was that?
It was all right. I mean, we were glad to be away from him and everything that was happening there, and then we did end out in a housing association place. Yeah, it was fine. It's funny at times how you can be grateful for some stuff, like having, you know, a caravan and somewhere to live, and me, my mum and my sister were all together. So, you know, we were obviously worried when we were being interviewed of the police, because they said, if your mum goes back with him, then you're taken into care. So I was very grateful that the three of us were all together.
So you said you moved around a lot during your, like, were you always in Lancashire?
Yeah, kind of, yeah, pretty much.
Did you have to go to, were you always at the same school?
No. So I went to a number of primary schools and 3 different high schools.
How did you do at school?
I did terribly. So I didn't get any A's to C's in my GCSEs. But I did go to college and I studied BTEC Performing Arts, and I did English at night school, and completely unsurprisingly to most people that would know me, I went on to university to study drama and business.
I'm not being very articulate because I'm trying to digest what you've told me, which is and trying to think of all the implications for you of speaking out and just wanting you to be comfortable that you've spoken out about this for the first time.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think that my mum has done such a fantastic job and had such a tough time. And this is the reason why, you know, people need to be knowing that they can get more support, you know, when they're going through stuff like that, and not having to make some of the really, you know, hard decisions that my mum had to make at different times to make sure that we had a roof over our heads and food in our bellies.
Vicky Foxcroft there, thank you so much for speaking to me. Next up, it's a real live wire, the new MP for Stockton South, Matt Vickers.
I might give that a Tinder thing a go like Michael Gove, but we'll see.
Really? Are you on, seriously, have you thought about doing the dating apps?
I haven't. I don't know how well I go down in the patch. You never quite know what you're going to get, as Michael learned. But we'll see. We'll see where I come out.
Not lonely?
No, I've a cracking group of friends in Parliament and back home. The friends in Parliament share all the challenges that we have as MPs. The friends back at home in the pub bring me back down to earth and make sure I'm well aware of what's going on the streets of Stockton. So, no, I'm very happy.
You have had proper jobs. You've worked in retail before, during and after university. Just tell us a little bit about the stores you've worked in.
So I loved working in retail. The thing about retail is it's always like this job, isn't it? You sell things instead of ideas. You get to meet all sorts of people. And the same with it when we knock doors. Before you start knocking doors, you think there's going to be average people or normal people behind the door. There are so many characters out there, so many amazing people. In this job, I had the pleasure of meeting them. And in that job, I also had the pleasure of not knowing who was going to walk through the door next. I remember actually, I did a bit of a job at Big W, and it was about picking. Big W was the Kingfisher all under one roof. It was a big Woolworths. Right. It had lines from all the Kingfisher group. And I remember it was about, there's a home for everything. So you know what you want to buy, and you think, who would ever buy that? And I remember we used to get these promotional items in. So my job was the promotions gig, looking at what items we're going to sell and which ones we're going to sell the fastest. and you got to talk to the buyer direct. This was while I was at uni. I remember one day putting these things out and they were god awful. It was these like crystal vasey things that you put pot poo in. I was like, who the hell's going to buy that? And I remember going out that day, I was like, this is going to be a tough gig, lads, but we've got to shift these. I remember getting home that night and my mum had bought one. I was like, there's a home for everything. Everybody wants something different. And as a retailer, you get to see that firsthand. You get to see people's aspirations, what they want to buy, what's valuable to them. And I loved it.
There's lots of campaigns, though, about shop workers being abused, treated with disrespect. Did you ever encounter or witness the tough side of retail?
I think you saw it every day, but you know what? We never saw it then like the people who see it now are seeing it. I saw the gritty side of it when I was there, but now it's worse than ever. There are 455 assaults on shop workers, not every month, not every week, every single day. That's just horrendous. Because the people who work in shops, they are the student who's got the first job, or the retiree who's just topping up their pension so they can have that holiday this year, or they can buy the grandkids something nice for Christmas. And that makes it even worse. You know, they're ordinary men and women earning a living. They're not getting paid a great deal. They're out there on the front line. They don't get assaulted because someone once said to me, why should there be anything special about shop workers? Well, actually, they don't get assaulted because they have a Tesco uniform or an M&S uniform on. They get assaulted because they're upholding the rules.
So you've definitely had normal jobs. We're giving you that.
Yeah.
You had a couple of political jobs, but not sort of long terms. You weren't like a big special advisor or those sort of roles. But tell me about your role for William Hague first.
So the thing is, when I was younger, lots of people around me, their heroes were the likes of Ryan Giggs and David Beckham. My hero was a middle-aged man, bald middle-aged man, who wanted to keep the pound. He had a very distinctive accent. Hague was a hero of mine. I thought it was fantastic. He believed in all the things that I believed in. I thought it was great. And I remember applying for a job working as his agent in the constituency, which isn't that far from home for me. I applied probably just out of interest to see what it was all about and to get to meet the chap. Anyway, I got the gig and was there for quite a while. Loved it. He's amazing. He's still a hero. He's amazing. He's a character. Everything that you see pre-scripted on television about him that's funny, everything that you believe, it's real, it's genuine. And he's a really entertaining character.
Tell us something we don't know about William Hague. You can't blame me for asking.
That's a good question.
Is there anything that would surprise us about William Hague that you will have seen up close and personal with him?
I think probably just that he's the gift that keeps on giving. He's every bit as entertaining in real life as he is on the television. Everybody assumes that these characters of Parliament are just that. Actually, he's just a really entertaining human being who's genuine.
Rishi Sunak. You had a bit of experience with Rishi Sunak as well. Tell us about that experience.
So when William left, we then had to select William's predecessor. And I remember at the time, it was quite, everybody talked about, how are we ever going to find another William? Because he is a star. How are we ever going to find another William? And the debate went on. These people come in for interview and everybody's thinking there's not one there. Where is he? He's not there. Who are we going to replace him with? Rishi, though, we found him and he was shining like a star from the beginning. He's just got it, hasn't he? He's got that energy. He's got that empathy. He understands people. Fantastic guy.
Anything that you can tell us about Rishi that we might not know?
Something that surprises people who've never met him in person.
Small.
That is exactly what I was going to say. He's pretty short, isn't he? He's not a very tall guy, but he makes up for it in character and gravitas. But yeah, he's pretty short. And he's a big fan of chocolate chip cookies, Maryland cookies, all the way.
Maryland, not even the posh stuff.
Not even the posh stuff.
Just a Maryland.
Regular guy, cookie muncher.
You've been watching the briefing highlights show of The Real Me with me, Gloria De Piero.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.